Dear listeners, welcome to another journey through ancient world. Today, it's ancient China, where power, prophecy, and destiny collide. In this story, you will witness the rise and fall of an empire, the unraveling of a curse, and the fight for freedom against unseen forces. Join us as we follow Xiu Mei, the one chosen to break the chains of the past and shape the future of a broken kingdom. Thank you for listening, and may the story unfold before you with all the mystery, intrigue, and wonder that awaits. So let's start. The kingdom of Qin had stood for centuries, a land where time moved at its own pace, impervious to the tumultuous forces that swept through other realms. It was a land of ancient traditions, where the emperor's will was law and the mountains were sacred. These towering peaks were more than just natural features. They were considered the very spine of the earth, ancient beings who held the weight of the kingdom's history upon their jagged shoulders. The people who lived in the valleys below had long believed that the mountains whispered their secrets, carrying messages from the gods themselves, and from ancient rulers who had long since passed. Among these people was Xiu Mei, a young woman born to a humble farmer and his wife in the small village of Yinchao. The village, nestled in the foothills of the great mountain ranges, was a peaceful one. Its people lived simple lives, tending to their crops and livestock, their days marked by the seasons, the rise and fall of the sun, and the inevitable harvests that shaped their year. Life was predictable, even dull for most. But for Xiu Mei, it felt suffocating. Ever since she was a little girl, Xiu Mei had felt a connection to the mountains. Her father often told her stories of the time when the empire had been founded, when the land was ruled by powerful emperors who spoke with the gods and who were blessed with the wisdom of the heavens. But Xiu Mei wasn't interested in the mundane tales of history. Her heart yearned for something more, something hidden in the folds of time, waiting to be uncovered. There were moments when she would stare at the towering peaks, a strange longing in her heart, a pull she could never quite explain. The wind would sweep through the trees, carrying with it a distant whisper, faint but undeniable. At times, she would close her eyes and listen, hearing a name on the wind, her own name, calling her. Xiu Mei, it would say, soft as a breeze but clear as a bell. She never spoke of this to anyone, least of all her father, who believed such things were fantasies. Her mother would smile and say, "Let the girl dream." But it was clear that both of them wanted her to lead a simple life, to marry, to help with the farm, to raise children, and to pass on the traditions of their ancestors. Xiu Mei knew this, yet deep down, she couldn't help but feel as though she were destined for something greater, something beyond the simple, endless cycle of village life. She often found herself wandering into the forests surrounding the village, her footsteps light on the earth, as if trying to avoid disturbing the very silence that seemed to listen to her every movement. She would walk for hours, her heart beating in sync with the rhythms of the earth, until she came to the foot of the mountains themselves. These were no ordinary mountains, but places of legend, filled with ancient ruins and forgotten temples. The villagers often spoke in hushed tones about them, warning children not to stray too far, for there were rumors of dangerous spirits that haunted the paths. On one such afternoon, when the sun was high and the air was thick with the scent of pine, Xiu Mei felt the call once more. She had grown accustomed to these inexplicable urges, but this time the pull was stronger than ever. It was as if the mountains themselves were summoning her, their ancient voices calling her to uncover a truth long buried beneath the earth. She had heard the elders speak of a secret temple hidden deep in the mountains, one that had been lost to time. It was said to hold the key to the emperor's power, a relic of unimaginable importance that had been sealed away centuries ago. Only the chosen can find it, her grandmother had once whispered. But you must be careful, child, for such power comes with a terrible price. Xiu Mei did not understand what her grandmother meant by this warning, but it had stayed with her over the years. She had grown increasingly curious about this temple, wondering if it might hold the answers to the strange dreams and visions that had plagued her for as long as she could remember. And so, on that fateful afternoon, Xiu Mei set out once more. The path she had chosen was far more treacherous than the others, winding its way through dense underbrush and rocky terrain. The deeper she ventured, the more she felt as though she were entering a world that was not meant for mortals. The air grew colder, the trees more twisted, their gnarled branches reaching out like fingers, and the sounds of the forest faded into an eerie silence. She felt as though the mountains were watching her, as though every step she took was being observed by something ancient and powerful. It was during this journey that she stumbled upon the pass between the two great oaks. Their trunks were so thick that it would take several men to encircle them, their bark rough and dark, etched with strange markings that seemed to glow faintly in the fading light. She had passed these trees before, but this time they felt different. There was a palpable energy in the air, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. Xiu Mei hesitated for a moment, unsure of what she might find, but something deep within her urged her forward. Her heart pounding, she stepped between the trees, the air suddenly growing heavy and cold. The moment she passed the threshold, she felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, a low hum vibrating through the earth. She gasped, her senses on high alert as the trees around her seemed to whisper, their leaves rustling in a language she could not understand. It was as though the very forest was alive, responding to her presence. And then she saw it. At the base of the trees, half buried in the moss and roots, was a stone tablet. It was large, its surface carved with intricate symbols and patterns that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. The stone was weathered with age, its edges worn smooth by centuries of exposure. Yet it radiated a strange energy, as if it were a conduit for something far greater than the mountains themselves. Xiu Mei knelt beside it, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch the surface. The moment her skin made contact with the stone, the air around her shifted. A gust of wind whipped through the forest, scattering leaves like confetti. The temperature dropped dramatically, and the world around her seemed to fade, leaving only the stone and the faint glow of the symbols. Suddenly, she was no longer alone. Visions flooded her mind, flashes of images, of places, of people, and of an ancient palace. She saw the Jade Emperor, his face obscured by shadows, sitting upon a throne of jade, his eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. Behind him, a hidden chamber lay in darkness, and beneath the throne, there was something that could change the fate of the entire empire. The images shifted, and Xiu Mei saw a young woman, someone she did not recognize, standing in the midst of a great storm. Her eyes burned with defiance, her heart filled with the courage to face whatever darkness lay ahead. Xiu Mei knew, without a doubt, that this woman was her. The stone cracked, and with it, the vision shattered, leaving Xiu Mei breathless and trembling. Her hand jerked back as if burned, and the stone crumbled to dust before her eyes. For a moment, she stood frozen in shock, trying to process what she had just experienced. The whispers from the mountains were now louder than ever, urging her to understand what had been revealed. The prophecy was unfolding, and she was at the center of it. As the last light of day vanished from the sky, Xiu Mei felt the weight of her destiny settle upon her shoulders. The mountain had chosen her, and now the path ahead was clear. She had to find the truth behind the Emperor's shadow, the legacy that lay hidden beneath the throne of jade. As the last vestiges of sunlight vanished behind the distant peaks, a deep, oppressive darkness fell over the valley. The winds that had whispered so urgently in the forest seemed to calm as night descended, but within Xiu Mei's mind, the storm of images and voices continued unabated. The vision of the Jade Emperor, his shadow stretching across the land, haunted her thoughts as she made her way back toward the village. She could still feel the stone beneath her fingertips. It's ancient, power coursing through her veins like a current that refused to release its grip. Her legs felt heavy, her steps unsteady, and yet there was an unspoken pull that urged her onward, compelling her to continue even as the night deepened. The forest around her seemed to close in, the trees now more like ancient sentinels that watched her every move. Xiu Mei quickened her pace, trying to shake the sense of being pursued, though no sound followed her in the quiet darkness. The wind, which had carried the whispers of the mountains to her ears, now carried something else, a chill, a warning. Xiu Mei's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled along the narrow path that led back to the village. The secrets she had uncovered seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog, and the weight of her newfound knowledge pressed down on her with every step. As she neared the edge of the village, she heard the familiar sound of laughter, the chatter of the village women. As they gathered by the hearth, the sound of children playing in the distance. It was a sound she had heard 1,000 times, but tonight it felt foreign, out of place. She could no longer see the village as she once had. It felt distant, like a life she had outgrown. Her father would be waiting for her, no doubt. He would scold her for wandering too far, for putting herself in danger. But Xiu Mei knew that she could not remain in the safety of the village any longer. The prophecy had begun to unravel, and the truth she sought lay beyond the walls of Yanshao. She had been chosen for something greater, and she could feel the weight of that destiny pulling her in ways she could not ignore. The night passed in a blur of uneasy sleep, plagued by dreams of the Jade Emperor and the mysterious young woman whose image had burned itself into her mind. The dreams were vivid, fragmented, and filled with the strange sense that she was not merely witnessing them, but experiencing them. She could feel the chill of the stone beneath her fingers, the weight of the Emperor's gaze, and the urgency of the prophecy that had yet to fully reveal itself. By morning, Xiu Mei knew what she had to do. She could no longer hide behind the comfort of her village life. The mountains had called to her, and the vision of the Jade Emperor's shadow still echoed in her soul. She had to journey to the heart of the empire, to the Forbidden City itself, and uncover the truth hidden within its walls. The Forbidden City was a place of legend, an ancient seat of power that no common person could approach without invitation. It was the heart of the Emperor's rule, a place filled with unimaginable wealth, opulence, and secrets. But it was also a place of danger, a city where power and intrigue ruled above all else. Xiu Mei knew that getting there would be no simple task. It was not just the journey that would be perilous, but the forces that stood in her way. Her father, upon hearing her resolve, was furious. He pleaded with her to stay, to be content with the life they had, but Xiu Mei's heart was firm. She had seen the truth, and she could no longer ignore it. "I have to go," she told him, her voice steady despite the knot of fear tightening. In her chest, "There are things I must learn, a path I must follow. You are my daughter." Her father cried, his voice breaking. "Your place is here, with me, with our people. You cannot walk into the heart of danger." "I must," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "It is the only way." With a heavy heart, her father gave her his blessing, though he did so with a reluctance that was impossible to ignore. "If you must go, then go with caution, and remember that the world beyond these hills is not kind." With little more than the clothes on her back, Xiu Mei set out at dawn, leaving the village behind. She knew that her journey would be long and fraught with peril, but the call of the mountains, the pull of the prophecy, was stronger than any fear she felt. Her path took her through dense forests, across vast plains, and over rolling hills, each step taking her farther from the safety of Yinshao and closer to the heart of the empire. Along the way, she encountered travelers, merchants, and wandering monks, each of whom offered her advice or assistance, but none of whom truly understood the depth of her mission. As the days turned into weeks, Xiu Mei's resolve grew stronger. She passed through several cities, the names of which she had heard whispered in stories, but never seen in person. The bustling streets were filled with merchants peddling their wares, soldiers in fine armor, and scholars who spoke in languages she could barely understand. But it was the distant, towering walls of the Forbidden City that haunted her thoughts. It was on the 10th day of her journey that she encountered a man who would change her path forever. He was an older man, dressed in tattered robes and traveling alone. His appearance was unremarkable, but there was something about his eyes, sharp, piercing, and full of secrets. He spoke to Xiu Mei in a voice that was both kind and unsettling. "You seek the truth," he said, as if reading her mind. "But the truth is a dangerous thing to uncover. The Emperor's shadow is long, and it stretches far beyond the walls." Of the Forbidden City, Xiu Mei regarded him warily. "Who are you?" "The question is not who I am," he replied, his smile thin and knowing. "The question is whether you are prepared to uncover the secrets that lie in wait. The Emperor's power is built on a foundation of lies, and the world you seek to understand is one of great treachery. Do not believe that you will find peace." In the palace of the Emperor, "I must know," Xiu Mei said, her voice steady. "I must understand what lies beneath the throne." The old man nodded, as if he had expected this answer. "Then be prepared, for the Forbidden City is not just a place of power. It is a cage, and the price of the truth is a heavy one." With that cryptic warning, the old man disappeared into the shadows of the evening, leaving Xiu Mei to contemplate his words. She felt the weight of his warning, but her determination was unwavering. The Emperor's shadow had already begun to loom over her, and there was no turning back. After several more days of travel, Xiu Mei finally reached the gates of the Forbidden City. It was even more magnificent than she had imagined. Towering walls of jade and gold stretched toward the sky, and the massive gates, guarded by soldiers in ornate armor, were adorned with intricate carvings of dragons and phoenixes. The city beyond was a labyrinth of courtyards, palaces, and temples, each more beautiful and imposing than the last. Xiu Mei stood at the gates, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come so far, and yet she knew that her journey was just beginning. The Forbidden City stood before Xiu Mei like a living, breathing entity, its towering walls speaking of millennia of power, conquest, and hidden truths. The grand gates loomed ahead, adorned with intricate golden dragons that writhed and twisted in the sunlight. Behind them, the sprawling palaces and courtyards of the Emperor's seat of power stretched as far as the eye could see. The city, though beautiful beyond imagination, felt like a prison, a labyrinth of secrets, and to enter it now was to step into the heart of an empire ruled by shadows. Xiu Mei stood at the edge of the great plaza before the gates, the weight of her decision bearing down on her. Her hand tightened around the satchel of supplies slung over her shoulder, and she drew a deep breath, steadying herself. The journey to this point had been long and difficult, but it was nothing compared to what lay ahead. The truth she sought, buried deep within the walls of this ancient city, was elusive, and yet she could feel it calling to her. A pull that had been growing stronger with each passing day, urging her toward an unknown fate. She approached the gates, her heart racing. The guards stationed at the entrance, their armor gleaming in the early morning light, regarded her with suspicion. One of them, a young man with a stern expression, stepped forward. "State your business, traveler," he commanded, his voice firm. Xiu Mei hesitated for a moment, weighing her words carefully. She could not simply walk into the Forbidden City without raising suspicion. There was no guarantee she would be allowed to enter, especially as a lone, unimportant traveler. The Emperor's palace was no place for commoners, and anyone seeking entry without the proper credentials was seen as a threat. "I seek knowledge," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil she felt inside. "I wish to meet with the Emperor's scholars." The guard looked her over, his eyes narrowing. It was clear he did not believe her story. But before he could respond, an older man, clearly of higher rank, appeared from behind the gates. He wore a long crimson robe embroidered with gold thread, the insignia of the Emperor's court visible on his chest. "What is this?" the older man asked, his tone commanding. "What business does this young woman have at the gates of the Forbidden City?" The young guard stiffened. "She claims to seek knowledge, my lord. She requests an audience with the scholars of the Emperor." The older man looked Xiu Mei up and down, his gaze piercing. There was something unsettling about the way he scrutinized her, as though he could see through her very soul. For a moment, Xiu Mei wondered if he somehow knew the true purpose of her visit. But there was no turning back now. She had come too far. "I see," the man said slowly, his voice soft but firm. "Let her through. But know this, young woman, there is more to the Emperor's court than meets the eye. Be careful what you seek." With a quick motion, the gates opened, and Xiu Mei stepped through. As she passed the guards, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching her closely, as though she were being measured for something she didn't yet understand. The city beyond was a world apart from the humble villages she had known. It was a place of awe-inspiring beauty, with marble walkways, fountains that glistened like silver, and gardens filled with flowers that Xiu Mei had never seen before. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the sounds of birds singing from the trees created a strange contrast to the quiet tension that seemed to linger in every corner. Xiu Mei was led by the older man through the palace grounds, her eyes darting from one magnificent structure to the next. The Forbidden City was filled with intricate carvings, gilded statues, and tapestries that told the history of the Emperor's dynasty. Every inch of the city screamed of wealth and power, but Xiu Mei's focus was singular, to find the truth she had come for. And somewhere within these walls, the answers she sought were waiting. The older man led her into a grand hall, its ceilings high and vaulted with massive columns of jade and gold. At the far end of the hall, a group of scholars sat around a large wooden table, deep in discussion. The man gestured for Xiu Mei to wait, his eyes scanning the room before he addressed one of the scholars. "Master Chun," he said, his voice low, "this young woman claims to seek knowledge. She wishes to speak with you." The scholar looked up, his eyes sharp and calculating. He was an older man, his hair graying at the temples, but there was a wisdom in his gaze that suggested he had seen much in his years of service to the Emperor. "Is that so?" Master Chun replied, his tone nonchalant but curious. "And what knowledge do you seek, young one?" Xiu Mei felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. The gravity of the moment was overwhelming, and she knew that her next words would determine the course of everything to come. She could not reveal the full truth to these men, not yet, at least. There were too many dangers, too many unknowns. "I seek knowledge of the Emperor's lineage," she said carefully, her voice steady. "Of the history of the Jade Emperor and his reign." Master Chun's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something like recognition passing through his gaze. The room grew still as the scholars exchanged glances, their hushed murmurs barely audible. The older man who had escorted Xiu Mei cleared his throat, but Master Chun raised a hand to silence him. "Very well," Master Chun said, his voice measured. "Follow me." Xiu Mei followed the scholar down a narrow corridor, her mind racing. The tension in the air was palpable, and she could feel the weight of every decision she had made to reach this point. The doors they passed seemed to loom larger with each step, as though they were guarding not just the palace, but the very secrets of the Empire. Eventually, they arrived at a small, secluded chamber. Inside, rows of ancient scrolls and books were carefully stacked on wooden shelves, each one more fragile than the last. At the far end of the room stood a large stone altar, its surface etched with symbols that Xiu Mei could not decipher. "This," Master Chan said, gesturing to the room, "is where we keep the most sacred of texts. Only the Emperor's closest scholars are allowed to study here." Xiu Mei's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting something like this. But to stand in the presence of these ancient relics, the very records of the Emperor's reign, was overwhelming. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, each scroll a key to unlocking the secrets she sought. "Tell me," Master Chun continued, his voice low, "why do you seek such knowledge? What is it that you hope to uncover?" Xiu Mei swallowed hard, her mind racing. There was no turning back now. She could no longer afford to play the role of the curious traveler. The truth was too close, too dangerous, and she needed answers. "I believe there is a hidden legacy," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. "A secret buried beneath the throne of the Jade Emperor, one that holds the key to the future of the Empire." Master Chun's eyes widened slightly, his expression unreadable. He studied Xiu Mei carefully, as if weighing her words. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the altar. He began to unravel an ancient scroll, its edges worn and tattered with age. The symbols on the paper seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "This," Master Chun said, holding up the scroll, "is the true history of the Jade Emperor. It tells of a power long forgotten, a curse that has haunted the throne for generations." Xiu Mei's breath caught in her throat. The words she had longed to hear, the truth she had sought, were finally within her grasp. "The Emperor's lineage," Master Chun continued, "is not as it seems. There are forces within this palace, dark forces, that have shaped the course of history. The curse of the Golden Lotus, as it is known, has plagued every ruler since the first Jade Emperor. It is said that the throne itself is cursed, that whoever sits upon it is doomed to a life of madness and ruin." Xiu Mei could hardly believe what she was hearing. A curse? The very notion seemed absurd, but the way Master Chun spoke of it, so matter-of-factly, made her wonder if there was some truth to it. "The curse," Master Chun continued, "is tied to the Emperor's shadow, a shadow that looms over the Empire, casting its dark influence over all who seek the throne." Xiu Mei's mind raced. The shadow, the vision she had seen in the forest. It was all starting to make sense. But there was still so much she didn't understand. The curse, the power, the shadow, it was all connected. And Xiu Mei knew that she was on the verge of uncovering a truth that could change the fate of the entire empire. "Tell me more," she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. Master Chun looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mix of caution and something else, something darker. "Be careful, young one," he said softly. "The truth you seek may destroy you. The Emperor's legacy is not one to be uncovered lightly." Xiu Mei's heart pounded with a force that matched the weight of the ancient scroll in her hands. The truth she had just uncovered was both exhilarating and terrifying. The Emperor's throne, this seat of unimaginable power, was cursed, and the shadow that loomed over it threatened to engulf everything in its path. The words Master Chun had spoken echoed in her mind like a relentless drumbeat, the curse of the Golden Lotus. She had thought it was a myth, a tale told to frighten children or deter ambitious men from seeking the throne. But now, standing in this sacred chamber surrounded by centuries of wisdom, she understood that it was much more than that. It was real, and it was far more dangerous than anyone had let on. The silence that followed Master Chun's revelation was suffocating. Xiu Mei struggled to process the magnitude of what she had learned. She could sense the old scholar watching her, his penetrating gaze trying to gauge her reaction. She needed to be careful. She could not afford to reveal her true intentions just yet, for she still did not fully understand the power that resided within the Emperor's palace, or how deep the roots of corruption ran. "This curse," Xiu Mei finally spoke, her voice steady but full of urgency. "How does it manifest? What happens to those who sit upon the throne?" Master Chun did not immediately answer. Instead, he looked down at the scroll in his hands, his fingers tracing the ancient characters with a reverence that Xiu Mei could not fully grasp. The curse of the Golden Lotus was something far older than the current emperor, but its legacy had lived on through the ages, from one ruler to the next. Yet the story of its origins had been lost to time, buried beneath the power struggles, wars, and betrayals that had shaped the history of the empire. "The curse," Master Chun began slowly, his voice quiet, "is a gradual descent into madness. It is said that whoever ascends to the throne is marked by it. A shadow falls over them, and they begin to unravel, piece by piece. Their minds fracture, their hearts grow cold, and they become consumed by a thirst for power that can never be quenched. They become like the jade they sit upon, beautiful on the outside, but hollow and fragile within." Xiu Mei felt a chill creep up her spine. She thought of the Jade Emperor, the ruler she had seen in her visions, sitting upon the Jade throne. Could he be one of the cursed? Could he, too, be slowly losing his mind to the weight of the throne? And if the curse was indeed true, what hope did the Empire have? "The curse is not just a physical affliction," Master Chun continued, his voice filled with a somber tone. "It is tied to the very foundations of the Empire. The throne of Jade was never meant to be a symbol of immortality, but of balance. It was built to represent harmony between heaven and earth. But with each ruler that sat upon it, the balance was tipped. The shadow of the Golden Lotus grew darker, and the land itself began to feel its effects." Xiu Mei was silent for a moment, letting the gravity of his words sink in. The curse was not just a curse upon the Emperor, but upon the Empire itself. Every ruler who had ever sat upon the throne had succumbed to its power, causing suffering across the land. The Empire, once strong and united, had become fractured, with dark forces lurking beneath its surface. The once mighty Silk Road that connected the Empire to the rest of the world had begun to wither, its trade routes growing dangerous and deserted. What had once been a symbol of the Empire's strength had become an echo of its decline. And then there was the prophecy, the whispers that had guided Xiu Mei to this point. The mountain had called her, and she had answered. But now she was confronted with a truth far more complex than she had imagined. She was not just a traveler seeking knowledge. She was a player in a much larger game, one that spanned centuries and continents. "There is more," Master Chun sighed, his voice low and filled with caution. "The curse is tied to a key that has been lost to time. The key is said to open a hidden chamber beneath the throne. There, within the earth itself, lies the source of the curse. If the key is found and the chamber opened, the curse can be broken. But finding it is no easy task." Xiu Mei's mind raced. The key, the source of the curse, hidden beneath the throne. She could feel the weight of it now. She had come to the Forbidden City seeking answers, and she had found them. But the truth had only raised more questions. Who had hidden the key? Why had it been hidden? And most importantly, where could she find it? "The key is not something that can be found easily," Master Chun continued, his voice growing more urgent. "It is hidden in plain sight, disguised as something innocuous. But those who have sought it in the past have all failed. The Emperor's advisors, the scholars, even the high priests, they have all searched for the key, but it remains elusive. Xiu Mei felt a pang of fear. If the key had been hidden for so long, and if even those closest to the Emperor could not find it, what hope did she have? But as the scholar's words reverberated in her mind, something else became clear. The key was not just an object. It was a symbol of the Emperor's power. It was the only way to free the Empire from the grip of the curse. And Xiu Mei knew, deep in her bones, that she was the one who would have to find it. "Do you know where the key is?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Master Chun's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Xiu Mei thought she saw a glimmer of fear in his gaze. He hesitated before answering. "I do not know," he said finally. "But I know that you cannot stay here. There are those who will try to stop you. The Emperor's court is filled with enemies, those who would do anything to keep the throne intact, even if it means feeding the curse and allowing it to consume the Empire." Xiu Mei nodded slowly, her mind racing with the implications of his words. The Emperor's advisors were not just political rivals. They were part of the problem. They had helped create the very curse that had haunted the throne for centuries. They were as much a part of the Empire's decay as the Emperor himself. "The Silk Road," Xiu Mei murmured, a thought forming in her mind. It was once a great trade route, connecting the Empire to the outside world, but now it is in ruins. Could it be that the key lies along its path, perhaps in the lost cities, forgotten by time? Master Chun's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "You are onto something," he said, his voice filled with quiet admiration. The Silk Road was once the lifeblood of the Empire. It connected the East to the West, and the riches and knowledge that flowed through it were unparalleled. But with the rise of the curse, the trade routes fell into disrepair. Many believe that the key to breaking the curse is hidden somewhere. Along the ancient road, Xiu Mei's heart leaped in her chest. The Silk Road, it was not just a symbol of the Empire's strength. It was the key to its salvation. But the road was no longer the safe passage it once had been. It was filled with bandits, marauders, and dangers of all kinds. And yet, Xiu Mei had no choice but to follow it, for she knew that if the key existed anywhere, it would be found along the remnants of the Great Road. "I will go," Xiu Mei said, her voice filled with resolve. "I will travel the Silk Road, and I will find the key. I will uncover the truth, no matter the cost." Master Chun looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with both admiration and concern. "Be careful, Xiu Mei. The path you are about to take is fraught with danger. You are not the only one seeking the key. Others will come for it, and they will stop at nothing to keep it hidden." "I am ready," she replied, her voice steady. "The Empire's future depends on it." With those words, Xiu Mei turned and left the chamber, her mind set on the journey ahead. The Silk Road stretched before her, a path filled with both hope and peril. But Xiu Mei knew that it was the only way to save the Empire from the shadow of the Jade Emperor, and from the curse that threatened to consume it all. The first step of Xiu Mei's journey was a long and arduous one. The city of the Emperor had opened its gates to her, but the empire beyond was vast, a sprawling land of mountains, plains, and deserts, stretching beyond the horizon. The weight of her mission pressed heavily upon her shoulders, the words of Master Chun echoing in her mind. The curse of the Golden Lotus, a dark, ancient force that had poisoned the very heart of the empire. The throne had been corrupted by it, and so had the empire itself. Each ruler who had taken the seat of power had fallen victim to the curse, slowly descending into madness as their rule crumbled under the weight of their ambition and the shadow that followed them. Xiu Mei could feel the oppressive weight of that curse even here, within the heart of the empire. The bustling streets of the capital city, with their vibrant market stalls and ornate palaces, had the appearance of grandeur and prosperity. But beneath that veneer, she sensed a festering rot. The city was full of whispers and secrets, people speaking in hushed tones behind closed doors, their faces shadowed with fear. There were those who knew the truth of the curse, and those who feared what would happen if it ever came to light. She had to move quickly before the Emperor's court grew suspicious of her presence. The scroll that Master Chun had given her, detailing the Emperor's history, had been a valuable guide, but it was also a dangerous thing to possess. There were few people within the Empire who would dare seek out the truth behind the curse, and even fewer who would allow such knowledge to slip into the wrong hands. Xiu Mei had to be cautious. Her every step was being watched. She could feel the eyes upon her, even as she made her way to the outer edges of the city, toward the remnants of the ancient Silk Road. The path before her was long, stretching across deserts and dangerous mountain ranges, past cities long abandoned and hidden beneath the shifting sands. The road was no longer the vibrant trade route it had once been. Bandits, rebels, and deserters now roamed the roads, preying on any who dared venture too far from the cities. But Xiu Mei had no choice. The key to breaking the curse lay somewhere along the ancient road, and she was determined to find it. The journey was slow and grueling. The days were long and the nights cold. Xiu Mei traveled alone, save for the company of her thoughts and the distant memories of the village she had left behind. She had not been prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. No one could have warned her for what she would face. The air grew thinner as she ascended the steep mountain paths, the landscape changing from verdant forests to barren cliffs and jagged rock. The wind howled through the empty valleys, carrying with it the echoes of the past. Xiu Mei could almost hear the whispers of the Empire's forgotten history, the stories of those who had once walked these paths in search of power, wealth, and knowledge. But Xiu Mei was not here for riches or glory. She was here to find the key that could break the curse, a key that was said to be hidden along the ancient road, buried beneath the ruins of long-forgotten cities. The key to the throne itself, and to the salvation of the Empire. She had heard stories of the Silk Road's legendary cities, flourishing trade centers that had once connected the East with the West, a melting pot of cultures, goods, and knowledge. But over time, the road had fallen into disrepair, its once thriving markets now abandoned and overgrown with weeds. It was said that the Empire's enemies had destroyed many of the cities during times of war, but others had simply faded into obscurity, lost to the sands of time. Xiu Mei had no map to guide her. The only thing she had to rely on were the stories she had heard as a child, and the cryptic hints she had gathered from the scrolls of Master Chun. She would have to rely on her instincts and hope that the clues would lead her to the key. As she ventured deeper into the mountains, she began to notice signs of an ancient civilization. Ruins hidden in the cliffs, faded carvings on the stone, and crumbled temples that had once stood proud and strong. She wondered if these were the remnants of one of the lost cities of the Silk Road. Could one of them hold the key she sought? Her first real clue came on the 4th day of her journey, as she passed through a narrow pass between two steep cliffs. She stumbled upon a large stone archway, half buried in the rubble. It was intricately carved, the stone etched with symbols and markings that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The archway was unlike anything Xiu Mei had ever seen before. It did not appear to be part of any known empire. There was a sense of something ancient about it, something that predated the current dynasty by thousands of years. Curious, Xiu Mei approached the archway and studied the carvings. Some of the symbols were familiar, ancient characters that she had seen in the scrolls of the Emperor's court. Others, however, were completely alien to her. They seemed to represent concepts she could not quite grasp, things beyond the physical world, hidden beneath layers of time and space. As she traced her fingers over the carvings, A soft hum vibrated through the air, as though the stone itself were alive. Xiu Mei's breath caught in her throat as the symbols began to glow faintly, pulsing with a soft, otherworldly light. It was as if the stone were reacting to her touch, revealing something hidden just beneath the surface. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the valley. Xiu Mei pulled her hand away from the stone, her heart racing. The archway began to shift, the stone grinding against itself, and a large section of the cliff face slid open, revealing a narrow passageway that led deep into the mountain. Xiu Mei hesitated. This was no ordinary cave. It felt like the entrance to something far older, something tied to the Empire's forgotten past. But the key was close, and she knew that she had to follow this path if she were to uncover the truth. She stepped into the passageway, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The air inside was cool and still, the scent of ancient earth thick in her nostrils. She could barely see in the dim light, but the faint glow of the symbols on the stone walls illuminated her way. The passage wound deeper into the heart of the mountain, twisting and turning until she could no longer tell which direction she was going. After what felt like hours, the passage opened up into a large cavern. The walls were lined with shelves filled with ancient artifacts, broken pottery, faded scrolls, and relics of a long-lost time. But it was the center of the cavern that drew Xiu Mei's attention. There, in the middle of the room, was a stone pedestal, upon which rested a small, intricately carved box. The box was made of dark jade, and it seemed to hum with an energy that Xiu Mei could feel deep in her chest. The box was the key. She could feel it in her bones. As Xiu Mei approached the pedestal, she noticed a set of ancient carvings around the base of the stone. The symbols matched those she had seen earlier on the archway, and she understood now what they meant. This was the heart of the curse, the source of the golden lotus. With trembling hands, Xiu Mei reached out to take the box. As soon as her fingers brushed against the jade surface, the room seemed to come alive. The air crackled with energy, and a voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the cavern. "Only the worthy may unlock the curse," the voice intoned, its tone heavy with power. "The price of knowledge is steep, and those who seek the truth must be prepared to pay." Xiu Mei froze. She had come so far, but now the true cost of her journey was becoming clear. The key was within her grasp, but unlocking its power would require a sacrifice, a price that she had not yet fully understood. She hesitated for only a moment before she gathered her courage and lifted the box from the pedestal. And then the cavern began to tremble. The moment Xiu Mei lifted the jade box from its pedestal, the cavern seemed to come alive with energy. The stone walls trembled as if the very foundations of the earth were shifting, groaning under the weight of ancient power. The air grew thick, with a strange pressure, and the light from the symbols on the walls flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. Xiu Mei felt the pulse of the jade box in her hands, its energy coursing through her like a heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, and unyielding. For a moment, she stood frozen in place, the weight of the box heavy in her palms. The voice that had echoed through the cavern seemed to reverberate in her mind, its words still ringing with the promise of a terrible price. The price of knowledge is steep, and those who seek the truth must be prepared to pay. Xiu Mei's breath caught in her throat. What price would she have to pay? Was it worth it? Her mind raced as she stared at the jade box, the weight of the curse that had haunted the Empire for centuries pressing down on her. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. She had to know the truth. As if in response to her thoughts, the jade box began to shift in her hands. The carvings on its surface began to glow, faintly at first, but then with increasing intensity. The air around her crackled with an unseen force, and Xiu Mei felt a surge of power rise within her, as though the very essence of the box was unlocking something deep within her soul. The pulse of the jade seemed to align with her heartbeat, the rhythm synchronized as though the box had become an extension of herself. Without warning, the box clicked open, revealing an ancient scroll rolled tightly inside. The scroll was made of a material unlike anything Xiu Mei had ever seen, thin, brittle, and translucent, almost like parchment, yet as dark as the shadows that filled the cavern. As she unfurled the scroll, her eyes widened in disbelief. The symbols written upon it were familiar, yet unlike any she had ever seen in the texts of the Emperor's court. They were ancient characters, older than the Empire itself, written in a script that seemed to pulse with an energy all its own. Suddenly, the voice returned, but this time it was not just in her mind. The words echoed through the cavern, reverberating off the stone walls, as if the very earth itself were speaking. Xiu Mei, daughter of the mountains, bearer of the Jade Key, the prophecy has been set in motion, the voice intoned. You have awakened the legacy of the Jade Emperor, the power of the Golden Lotus, which has lain dormant for centuries. The curse of the throne is not just a curse upon the Emperor, but upon the Empire itself. It is a shadow that stretches across all of history, a force that has shaped the rise and fall of dynasties. It is a legacy of greed, ambition, and betrayal. Xiu Mei's heart raced as she listened to the voice, her mind struggling to comprehend what it was telling her. The prophecy had begun, and she was at the center of it. She had unlocked the power of the Jade Emperor, but with it came a responsibility she had never anticipated. She had thought she was simply seeking the truth, but now it seemed that the truth was far more dangerous than she had imagined. The Golden Lotus is not just a symbol of power, the voice continued, its tone filled with the weight of ages. It is a living force, a dark energy that binds the Emperor to the throne. It feeds upon ambition, corruption, and the hunger for control. Every ruler who has ever sat upon the Jade Emperor's throne has been marked by it, slowly consumed. By its influence, the curse was not an accident. It was the price of power, the cost of seeking control over the heavens themselves. Xiu Mei's mind reeled as she tried to process the enormity of the revelation. The throne of the Jade Emperor was not just a seat of power, it was a vessel for the curse, the Golden Lotus itself. It had been designed to bind the Emperor to the two land to ensure that the ruler remained in control of the empire. But the curse had twisted that intention, turning the throne into a prison that slowly eroded the Emperor's mind and soul. The throne is a prison, Xiu Mei whispered, almost as if speaking to herself. Yes, the voice replied, its resonance deepening with an eerie finality. And you, Xiu Mei, are the one who must break the cycle. The curse cannot be undone by the hands of any ruler. It is the bloodline that carries it, and it is you who must sever that link. But be warned, seeking to destroy the throne will come at a great cost. The empire will not remain intact if the throne falls. And yet, if you do not act, the curse will spread until nothing is left but ruin. Xiu Mei's hands trembled as she held the scroll, her thoughts in turmoil. The prophecy had been set in motion, and she was its chosen bearer. She had unlocked the secret of the Golden Lotus, but now she was faced with a choice. The Emperor's throne was a symbol of unity, a beacon of power for the Empire. But it was also the source of the Empire's corruption and downfall. To destroy the throne was to destroy the heart of the Empire itself. But to leave it in place would mean condemning future generations to live under its dark influence. A heavy silence settled in the cavern as the weight of her decision pressed upon her. She had come seeking answers, but now she was faced with a question she had not anticipated. Should she destroy the throne, severing the bond that held the Empire together, or should she leave it intact, allowing the curse to continue consuming everything in its path? Xiu Mei felt the pull of both choices, one leading toward destruction, the other toward a future she could not fully understand. The prophecy was clear in one thing. The decision she made would change the course of history. There was no going back. "The key has been unlocked," the voice whispered, fading into the distance. "The choice is yours to make. But remember, the cost of the truth is steep. To seek knowledge is to carry the burden of the world." The cavern seemed quiet. As the voice faded away, leaving Xiu Mei alone with the scroll in her hands. She was no longer just a traveler on a journey to uncover the past. She was the keeper of the curse, the one who would decide the fate of the empire. With a heavy heart, Xiu Mei carefully rolled up the scroll and placed it back inside the jade box. She had much to think about, and the path ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Her journey was far from over. The prophecy had unfolded, and the future of the empire now rested in her hands. The weight of the jade box in Xiu Mei's hands was nothing compared to the burden settling in her heart. Her thoughts raced, each one more tangled than the last, as she made her way out of the cavern. The stone walls seemed to press in on her, as if the mountain itself was holding her hostage, demanding that she make her decision. The words of the prophecy echoed in her mind with each step, reverberating like the toll of a distant bell. The curse cannot be undone by the hands of any ruler. It is the bloodline that carries it, and it is you who must sever that link. The choice that lay before her was as sharp as a blade, and the consequences of either decision were equally daunting. To destroy the throne, to break the cycle of the Golden Lotus, would mean the collapse of the empire, its foundations crumbling beneath the weight of history. But to leave the throne intact would condemn future generations to live in the shadow of the curse, watching as each emperor slowly succumbed to its influence. Xiu Mei stepped out of the cave and into the open air, the cool breeze of the mountains carrying the scent of pine and earth. The landscape before her was vast, the mountains stretching endlessly toward the horizon. It was a world untouched by the chaos that churned in her heart, a world that seemed indifferent to the turmoil of the empire below. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within. The prophecy had been set in motion. There was no turning back now. She had come seeking answers, but now she was the one holding the key to the future. And the future, she knew, was not something she could control easily. As she journeyed back down the mountain, the jade box clutched tightly in her hands. Xiu Mei could not shake the feeling that the empire was watching her, waiting for her to make her move. The path ahead was long and uncertain, and the shadows of the empire were far-reaching. Xiu Mei's thoughts turned to the emperor. The Jade Emperor, the one who sat upon the cursed throne, was still a mystery to her. She had seen him in her visions, his face obscured, his power undeniable. But who was he really? What kind of man could wield such power? And what had driven him to sit upon a throne that would slowly consume him, mind and soul? She knew that she had to find him. She had to confront him if she was to understand the curse fully. But how could she stand before a man who had been marked by such an ancient and powerful force? Could she even trust him? The Emperor was, after all, a symbol of the very power that had caused the downfall of the empire. He was both a victim and a perpetrator of the curse. As Xiu Mei descended further from the mountain, the landscape shifted. The rolling hills gave way to sprawling plains, and the distant cities that dotted the land seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the empire. Each step took her closer to the heart of the empire, closer to the Forbidden City, where the emperor sat upon his throne, unaware of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. The city loomed ahead, its towering walls rising like a fortress against the sky. The Forbidden City, with its intricate gates and courtyards, was a place of both awe and fear. It was the seat of power, the heart of the empire, but it was also a place filled with shadows, secrets hidden behind closed doors, power, struggles that played out in silence, and whispers that carried through the halls like ghosts. Xiu Mei's journey had brought her to this point, and now she had to confront the Emperor, the one who held the key to the Empire's fate. But how would she approach him? She had no allies, no power to speak of. All she had was the knowledge. She had uncovered the prophecy that had been set in motion, and the jade box that held the key to the curse. As she neared the gates of the Forbidden City, Xiu Mei was stopped by a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a man, dressed in dark robes, his face partially obscured by a hood. He was tall and slender, his movements fluid and deliberate. There was something unsettling about him, something that set her on edge. "Who are you?" Xiu Mei asked, her hand instinctively reaching for the box hidden beneath her cloak. The man did not answer immediately. He stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "I am someone who has been waiting for you," he said, his voice low and smooth, like silk gliding over stone. "You have come far, Xiu Mei, but the path you are on is fraught with danger." Xiu Mei studied him carefully, unsure whether to trust him or not. There was something about his presence that felt familiar, as though she had encountered him before in one of her dreams or visions. But she couldn't place it. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice firm. "I'm here to seek the Emperor. I need to speak with him." The man's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "The Emperor is not the one you need to speak with," he said, his voice carrying an odd weight. "There are others who control the fate of the Empire, those who sit behind the throne, pulling the strings. The Emperor is but a puppet, a figurehead, nothing more." Xiu Mei's heart skipped a beat. Behind the throne? The words sent a chill down her spine. Who were these people? These shadowy figures who lurked in the darkness, controlling the Empire? From the shadows? "You don't understand," the man continued, his tone growing more urgent. "The curse you seek to destroy is not just the work of the Emperor. It is a force that runs deeper than you know. The Golden Lotus has spread its influence through the very fabric of the Empire. It is a curse that has been woven into the lives of every ruler, every general, every scholar, and every soldier. To break the curse, you must first understand the truth of those who have shaped the Empire, those who have manipulated it for centuries." Xiu Mei took a step back, her mind reeling. The man's words were both a revelation and a warning. The curse was not just the work of the Emperor. It was something far older, far deeper. And there were those who had been pulling the strings from the shadows all along. "You don't have much time," the man said, his gaze growing darker. "The Emperor will soon learn that you are here, and when he does, he will stop at nothing to protect his throne. But the throne is not what you think it is. It is not the source of the curse. It is a prison for the curse. And the Emperor is its prisoner." Xiu Mei's head spun as the man's words sank in. The throne was not the source of the curse. The Emperor was a prisoner, and the real power lay hidden, far beyond the throne itself. "Who are you?" Xiu Mei demanded, her voice rising with both frustration and fear. "What do you know about all of this?" The man stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "I am someone who understands the price of power, and I am here to offer you a choice. You can continue down your path, seeking to destroy the throne and break the curse, or you can join us. We have the means to destroy the curse, but we need your help. Together, we can bring an end to the Emperor's reign and free the Empire from the Golden Lotus." Xiu Mei's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of the man's words settled upon her. He was offering her an alliance with those who controlled the Empire from the shadows. But at what cost? What kind of power did they wield, and could she trust them? For a long moment, Xiu Mei stood there, torn between the unknown dangers of the Emperor's court and the mysterious offer of the man before her. She could feel the weight of the jade box pressing against her chest, its power calling to her, urging her to make a choice. The shadow of the rising sun stretched across the land, casting long, ominous shadows over the empire. And Xiu Mei knew, deep in her soul, that whatever path she chose, the future of the empire would never be the same. Xiu Mei's pulse quickened as she stood before the mysterious man, her mind whirling with questions. The Forbidden City, the epicenter of the Emperor's power, loomed in the distance behind her. But the man's words had planted a seed of doubt, an unsettling thought that gnawed at her, urging her to question everything she had believed. The Emperor is a prisoner. His throne was not the origin of the curse. It was its prison. The Golden Lotus, the dark power that bound the Emperor and his ancestors, had woven its way into every corner of the empire, infecting it like a poison that no one seemed able to cure. The man in front of her, cloaked in shadows, offered a different path, one that ran parallel to her original mission. He spoke of hidden power, of forces controlling the empire from behind the curtain. And that power, he claimed, was the key to ending the curse. The choice she now faced was nothing short of monumental. Should she pursue the Emperor and try to destroy the throne, severing the ancient curse forever? Or should she align herself with these shadowy figures who promised to help her unlock the true power behind the Empire's twisted history? Xiu Mei clenched the jade box tighter, feeling the pulse of its ancient power coursing through her fingers. The box, a symbol of the curse she sought to destroy, now felt like the very essence of the Empire's tangled fate. Could she trust this man who stood before her, speaking of hidden truths and dangerous alliances? Or was this yet another trap in the endless web of power struggles that had defined the Empire for centuries? Her heart ached with uncertainty, but one thing was clear: time was running out. Every moment she hesitated brought the Emperor one step closer to learning of her presence. If he learned of her mission, the consequences could be dire. She needed to act quickly, but how could she move forward when the truth was so elusive? "I don't know who you are," Xiu Mei said, her voice steady despite the swirl of emotions inside her. "But I know that the throne must be destroyed. The curse has claimed too many lives, and I cannot stand by and allow it to continue." The man's smile was thin, almost mocking. "You are more like the Emperor than you realize. Both of you are prisoners, caught in a game of power you don't fully understand. You think destroying the throne will end the curse, but all you will accomplish is your own ruin and that of the Empire. You will be nothing more than a puppet to the forces that have always controlled this land." His words struck her like a blow. He was right, in a way. She had been consumed by the belief that destroying the throne was the only way to free the Empire from the curse. But what if there were deeper forces at play, forces beyond the throne itself, controlling the very course of history? Xiu Mei took a step back, her mind racing. "You're offering me an alliance, then? To destroy the Emperor and his throne?" The man shook his head, his eyes gleaming with dark knowledge. "Not quite. I offer you something far more valuable. The power to destroy the curse itself, to break the chains that bind the Empire to the Golden Lotus. The Emperor is but a puppet, a figurehead. The real power lies in the shadows. The war that has been waged for centuries has been hidden from the world. But you are the one who has the key to ending it." Xiu Mei's breath caught in her throat. "A hidden war?" She whispered. "Who are these forces? And why should I trust you?" The man's expression darkened. "Trust is a luxury you cannot afford. The forces behind the throne are ancient, and their influence extends far beyond the Emperor. They have manipulated the Empire's rulers for generations. The Emperor's family is no more than a vessel for their power. The Golden Lotus was never meant to be broken. It was meant to serve them. You can break the curse, but it will require more than just a simple act of destruction. It will require you to understand the true nature of power and how it has been wielded by those who rule the empire from the shadows. Xiu Mei's mind reeled with the weight of his words. She had always believed that the emperor and the throne were the center of the empire's problems. But now, it seemed, there were darker forces at play, forces that had shaped the empire's destiny for centuries, pulling strings from behind the scenes. And these forces, whatever they were, had been guiding her all along. The man stepped closer, his voice lowering to a whisper. "You are not the first to seek the throne's destruction. There have been others, those who have tried to overthrow the emperor, only to fall victim to the very power they sought to destroy. You are different, Xiu Mei. You hold the key to the empire's future, but you must choose your path carefully. The war that has been hidden for so long is about to erupt. The emperor will not sit idly by while you move against him, and there are others who will seek to stop you." Xiu Mei stood in silence, her heart pounding. The man's words held a kernel of truth, but they also reeked of manipulation. Who was he, really? What were his true intentions? And what did he mean by a hidden war? She could not afford to trust him blindly, but she also knew that she could not afford to ignore him either. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Who else is involved in this war? She asked, her voice steady. The man smiled, a thin, cryptic smile. The emperor's advisors, the generals, the noble families. They all serve the same forces, but they are not united. There is discord among them. The empire is on the brink of a civil war, and the throne is the prize. But what they do not realize is that the true battle is not for the throne. It is for the soul of the empire itself. Xiu Mei's mind raced. A civil war? The empire was already fractured, but this would push it to the brink of chaos. Could she afford to allow this war to unfold? Or could she use the opportunity to strike at the heart of the empire's corruption, to break the chains that had held it captive for so long? "I'm not sure I understand," she said, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "What do you want from me?" The man's eyes gleamed with something darker than knowledge, something that bordered on madness. "I want you to help me free the empire from the grip of those who control it. Together, we can break the curse, tear down the throne, and rebuild the empire. But you must be willing to choose a side." Xiu Mei's breath caught in her throat as she realized the gravity of his words. She was standing at the crossroads of a war she had not fully understood, one that had been hidden from the world for generations. And now, she was the one who had to choose where she stood. The man's gaze softened, but there was still a hint of something dangerous in his eyes. "The emperor's reign is over, Xiu Mei. It is time for something new. But the question is, who will rise to take his place?" Xiu Mei stared into his eyes, her heart torn. She had come here to destroy the curse, to free the empire from the emperor's twisted grip. But now, she was being asked to choose between two conflicting visions of power, two forces that would shape the future of the empire. And the path she chose would determine not only the fate of the empire, but her own destiny as well. The winds of change were stirring, and the empire stood on the brink of a war that would reshape its future. And Xiu Mei, caught in the center of it all, had only one choice to make. Which side would she fight for? Xiu Mei's decision loomed over her like a storm cloud, heavy and full of promise and destruction. She stood at the precipice of a choice that would not only change the course of her life, but also decide the fate of an entire empire. The man before her, the mysterious figure who spoke of hidden wars and shadowy figures controlling the fate of the empire, had presented her with an offer she could not ignore. The emperor was no longer the true center of power, his throne cursed, and Decaying was only the surface of something far deeper, something that had been quietly shaping the Empire's destiny from the shadows. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it was the only path that could lead to the truth. The jade box she held in her hands pulsed with the power of the golden lotus, and with it came the burden of knowledge that she could not turn away from, no matter how daunting the consequences. "Choose carefully, Xiu Mei," the man's voice echoed in the stillness. "The time of the Emperor's rule is ending. The forces behind the throne are in disarray, but their power still runs deep. You are standing at the threshold of a new age, one where the Empire can either be saved or destroyed. The question is, who will lead it?" Xiu Mei's gaze drifted toward the looming walls of the Forbidden City, the heart of the Empire, where the Emperor sat upon his cursed throne, unknowingly shackled by the very forces that had made him a puppet. But the choice was no longer just about the throne. It was about more, about power, freedom, and the very soul of the Empire itself. And Xiu Mei had no illusions. The battle she was about to enter was not one of simple good versus evil. It was a struggle for control, for the future of an empire that had been ravaged by its own greed and ambition. "I don't know if I can trust you," Xiu Mei finally said, her voice filled with resolve and uncertainty. "But what I do know is that I cannot let the Empire fall under the weight of the curse. The Golden Lotus must be destroyed, no matter the cost." The man's eyes darkened, his smile thin and knowing. "That is exactly what I wanted to hear. Together, we can break the chains of the Golden Lotus and free the Empire from the puppet masters that have controlled it for so long. But be warned, this is not a simple task. The forces that stand behind the Emperor will not relinquish their control easily. They will fight to keep the Empire in their grip." Xiu Mei's mind raced as she considered his words. She had come to destroy the throne, to break the curse that had haunted the Emperor's family for generations. But now she understood that the curse was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The Empire was being controlled by unseen hands, and the throne was merely a symbol of that control. To break the curse would not be enough. She had to uncover the truth about these shadowy figures, about the forces that had shaped the Empire's destiny, and perhaps, just perhaps, take their power for herself. She turned to face the man fully, her resolve hardening. "I will help you, but understand this. I will do what is necessary to free the Empire, even if that means making difficult choices along the way." The man nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "Then let us begin. The time for hesitation is over. The Emperor's reign is crumbling, and the true power behind the throne is waiting to be revealed." Xiu Mei did not look back as she followed the man through the narrow alleyways that led to the gates of the Forbidden City. The air felt thick with anticipation, a sense that something was about to change irrevocably. She could feel the pulse of the jade box against her chest, as if it was alive with the energy of the Empire itself. The whispers of the Golden Lotus seemed to swirl around her, urging her forward, urging her to embrace the power she had unlocked. As they approached the gates, the guards stood at attention, their eyes trained on the man beside her. But they did not question him. They did not stop them. A man was known, perhaps feared, within the Emperor's court, and his presence carried weight. Xiu Mei could feel the tension in the air, the knowledge that every step she took was bringing her closer to the heart of the Empire's power, closer to the Emperor and the truth she sought. The gates of the Forbidden City opened slowly, and Xiu Mei stepped inside. The sights and sounds of the palace were overwhelming. The grandeur of the courtyards, the bustle of servants and soldiers, the soft rustling of silk and whispers of court intrigue. But beneath it all, there was a palpable sense of fear, as if the palace itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable collapse. Xiu Mei and the man moved through the palace with purpose, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. Xiu Mei felt the weight of every gaze upon her as they passed through the courtyards, but she did not falter. The emperor was within reach, and she would not stop until she had the answers she needed. They arrived at a grand hall, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting the rise and fall of the empire's greatest rulers. At the far end of the hall sat the throne, the seat of the Jade Emperor's power. Xiu Mei's heart clenched as she gazed at the throne. It was both magnificent and terrifying, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong with the empire. And there, seated upon it, was the emperor himself. He was not the figure she had imagined. He was older than she had expected, his face worn and gaunt, the weight of years of power and corruption etched into his features. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, now seemed dull, as though the fire that had once driven him had been extinguished by the curse of the Golden Lotus. He looked up as Xiu Mei and the man entered the hall, his gaze flicking over them with a disinterested air. He did not recognize her, and perhaps that was a blessing. A man beside her stepped forward, bowing low before the emperor, his tone respectful, but laced with something darker. "Your Majesty," the man said, his voice smooth, "the time has come for us to speak. The forces that have been at work behind your throne have reached their end. It is time to reveal the truth." The emperor's eyes narrowed, his brow furrowing. "What is this madness you speak of? My reign is secure. There is no truth to reveal." The man smiled, a cold, almost pitying smile. "The truth has been hidden for far too long, Your Majesty. But it is time for the Empire to know what has truly been happening. The curse of the Golden Lotus was never meant to destroy the throne. It was meant to enslave you. The throne was never yours to rule, but a prison that has bound you to the very forces that have shaped the Empire's destiny." Xiu Mei watched as the Emperor's expression shifted. For the first time in years, something like fear flickered. In his eyes, the truth was finally coming to light, and the Empire was about to be changed forever. But what would that truth mean for her? The room was silent for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. The Emperor sat frozen on his throne, his gaunt face pale, as if the words spoken by the man beside Xiu Mei had cut through him like a blade. His eyes flickered, darting between the man and Xiu Mei, as if trying to piece together some unspoken truth. The tension in the room was thick, suffocating, and for the first time, Xiu Mei could sense the Emperor's vulnerability. His power seemed fragile, a mere illusion built on the crumbling foundation of a curse. The man beside Xiu Mei, who had led her through the labyrinth of the Empire's hidden corridors, stepped forward with an air of finality. His voice rang out, smooth and unyielding. "Your reign is over, Your Majesty," he said, the words chilling. In their certainty, the forces that have been behind the throne, the secret manipulators, the shadowy rulers who pull the strings, are no longer in control. The Empire has already begun to fracture under the weight of their corruption. The Golden Lotus was never meant to be a gift. It was a prison, a curse to enslave you. And now it is time for the truth to be revealed. Xiu Mei felt the weight of his words, but she also felt something deeper. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, as if the very stones of the palace were waiting for the inevitable. She had come here with a single purpose: to end the curse, to break the cycle that had bound the Emperor and his ancestors to a fate of madness and ruin. But now, standing before the Emperor, she realized the complexity of the situation. It was no longer just about the throne, the curse, or the Emperor. The web of power that had entangled the Empire was far more intricate than she could have ever imagined. The Emperor stirred, a faint shudder running through his frame. His eyes were empty, devoid of the fire that once burned in them. His fingers, thin and trembling, gripped the armrests of the throne as he tried to steady himself, his voice hoarse when he finally spoke. "You speak of things you cannot understand," the emperor croaked. "The throne is mine by divine right. I rule the empire. I am the Jade Emperor." Xiu Mei took a step forward, feeling the weight of her decision settle into her bones. This was the moment. The moment where everything she had sought to understand, everything she had fought for, could either be realized or shattered. The Jade box pressed against her chest, as if it had become an extension of her soul, a reminder of what she had come to do. She had to act, but how could she destroy the Emperor, the symbol of the Empire's power, without destroying everything else? In the process, "You are not the ruler you think you are," Xiu Mei said, her voice calm but resolute. "You are never meant to sit upon the throne. You are a prisoner, bound by the curse of the Golden Lotus, controlled by forces older than your reign. The Empire has been shaped by shadows, and those shadows have used you as a puppet." The Emperor's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and fear. "I am the Emperor. You are a fool to speak such lies." The man beside Xiu Mei, his face cold and unyielding, stepped forward, his voice like ice. "You are nothing more than a pawn. The curse was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to control you, to keep you chained to the throne so that the true power could thrive in the shadows. You have lived your entire life thinking you were the ruler, but in truth, were a tool used by others to maintain their control over the Empire." Xiu Mei's heart pounded as she watched the Emperor's face twist with confusion and rage. She could feel the tension rising, thick as smoke, suffocating the very air in the room. It was clear now that the Emperor had no idea the extent of the forces that had shaped his life, nor did he seem capable of understanding the scope of what was happening. He was trapped, a puppet of forces greater than him, and now his empire was crumbling beneath his feet. "You have betrayed me," the Emperor suddenly shouted, his voice cracking with fury. "All of you. You dare to come into my palace and speak of rebellion? Do you think I am powerless?" A cold laugh escaped the man beside Xiu Mei. "Power is an illusion, Your Majesty. You have never been in control. The curse that has consumed you is a reflection of the Empire itself, a land ruled by deceit, by hidden hands, by forces that lurk in the dark." Xiu Mei's mind raced. This was not the moment to falter. She had to make a choice. She had come here to break the curse, but to destroy the Emperor would be to destroy the last semblance of order in the Empire. What would happen if she severed the link that bound the Emperor to the throne? Would it free the Empire from the curse, or would it send the kingdom into total chaos? Before she could make her decision, there was a loud crash from the back of the room. A group of armored guards stormed in, their weapons raised and ready for battle. The man beside Xiu Mei immediately moved, his eyes flashing with an unreadable expression. He was not surprised. In fact, he had anticipated this moment. The Emperor's loyalists were here to protect their ruler. Xiu Mei's heart skipped a beat. The palace had become a battleground, and she was caught in the middle. She could feel the weight of the jade box against her chest, as if urging her to act quickly. The forces behind the throne had made their move, and now Xiu Mei had to decide. Where her allegiance lay, the guards advanced on them, swords drawn, but the man beside Xiu Mei raised his hand in a sharp gesture. "Stay back," he commanded, his voice echoing through the room. "We are not your enemies. We are the ones who seek to free the Emperor from the chains that bind him." But the guards did not hesitate. They charged, and in that moment, the air was filled with the clash of steel and the shouts of soldiers. Xiu Mei's mind raced as she dodged an oncoming blade, her instincts kicking in. She had come here for one purpose: to break the curse, to end the reign of the Emperor and the Empire's hidden puppet masters. But now she realized that to do so might mean bloodshed, chaos, and destruction beyond her control. She fought with all the fury and resolve that had brought her this far. She knew what she had to do, but in the heat of the moment, with the clash of weapons surrounding her, her decision seemed both distant and immediate. The battle raged on, and with each strike of her blade, she felt herself slipping further into the storm of betrayal and conflict. The Emperor's loyalists were formidable, but they were not enough to stop the man beside her. His movements were swift and precise, his mastery of combat unmatched. With every guard that fell, Xiu Mei's thoughts turned inward. The curse, the throne, the Emperor, all of it was leading to a single, inevitable truth. But what truth would she choose? As the battle reached its crescendo, the man beside her turned and caught her gaze. Now, Xiu Mei, now is the time to choose. And with that, the world seemed to slow, the palace now a battleground, the fate of the empire hanging in the balance. A clash of steel filled the air, echoing through the grand halls of the Forbidden City, as Xiu Mei's heart raced with a mix of adrenaline and uncertainty. The air was thick with the scent of iron and sweat, and the cries of battle rang in her ears as she fought to keep herself grounded. The guards, loyal to the Emperor, pressed forward relentlessly, their swords flashing in the dim light of the throne room. The man beside her moved with the deadly precision of a seasoned warrior, cutting through the soldiers with a fluidity that seemed almost unnatural. Each swing of his blade was a masterstroke, elegant yet brutal, efficient yet merciless. Xiu Mei's own hands gripped her sword tightly as she blocked another blow, her thoughts racing. She had come to the Forbidden City with a single purpose: to break the curse of the Golden Lotus, to shatter the throne's hold on the Emperor and the Empire. But now, standing on the precipice of destruction, she realized that the consequences of her actions were far greater than she had imagined. The Emperor, seated on his cursed throne, was but a puppet, his reign a shadow of the Empire's true rulers, those who had controlled him from the very beginning. The prophecy had been clear. She was the one chosen to break the chains that bound the Empire, to free it from the clutches of the Golden Lotus. But what did that freedom truly mean? Was it worth the bloodshed, the chaos, and the inevitable collapse of the Empire? And if she chose to destroy the throne, what would rise in its place? Would it be a new dawn of hope, or a new era of darkness? Xiu Mei blocked another strike, her focus narrowing. She couldn't afford to hesitate. The time to act was now, and there was no turning back. The battle raged on, each blow striking with the force of inevitability. The man beside her, his name still unknown to her, fought like a storm, his every move a calculated step toward victory. He seemed to be everywhere at once, cutting through enemies with cold precision, his eyes glowing with an intensity that matched the fire in Xiu Mei's chest. She could feel the pulse of the jade box against her side, a reminder of the ancient power that flowed through her veins. "Focus, Xiu Mei," the man shouted, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "The curse, the throne, it all begins and ends here. Destroy it, and you destroy the shadow that has plagued this empire for centuries." Xiu Mei's breath caught in her throat. This was the moment. She had the power to change everything, to break the curse, to shatter the empire's corrupt foundation, and free it from the grip of the Golden Lotus. But was she ready to bear the consequences? Could she live with the chaos that would follow? The Emperor, watching from his throne, seemed detached from the carnage unfolding before him. His eyes, once filled with the fire of rulership, were now vacant, empty, like those of a man who had long since given up on his own soul. His face was pale, and his fingers gripped the armrests of the throne with a white-knuckled intensity, as if the very throne were the only thing holding him together. "End this, Xiu Mei," the man said, his voice low and urgent. "It's time." The throne's time has passed. Xiu Mei's eyes narrowed as she glanced at the emperor. His frailty, his desperation, it was clear now. He had never been the true ruler of the empire. The forces that had controlled him, that had manipulated him into a puppet of power, were the true architects of the empire's downfall. And now, she had the chance to break the cycle, to end the curse, and free the empire from its chains. But as her gaze fell upon the throne, she felt a pang of hesitation. The empire was built on the foundation of that throne. Destroy it, and she would unravel the very fabric of the world that had held it together. Would the empire survive without it? Would anything survive? The man beside her seemed to sense her hesitation. "The throne is not your enemy," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper amidst the clamor. "The forces behind it are. The curse, the golden lotus, these are the true enemies. The throne is merely a symbol of the empire's brokenness. It must be destroyed." Xiu Mei's hand tightened around her sword, and she turned her gaze back to the emperor. His eyes locked with hers for the briefest of moments, and in that instant, she saw something she hadn't expected, something that shook her to her core. There was no hatred in his eyes, no anger or defiance. There was only an overwhelming sadness, a quiet acceptance of the fate that had been forced upon him. The truth of the curse was not just that the emperor was a puppet, it was that he had been a prisoner of his own power, a prisoner of the empire's greed and ambition. He had never truly ruled. He had merely been a vessel for the golden lotus to work its influence upon the world. And now, in this moment of chaos, he was a hollow shell of a man, broken and lost. Xiu Mei's heart twisted. She had come here to destroy him, to break the curse and free the empire, but she had never fully understood the cost. The emperor, despite his power, was just a man, a victim of forces far beyond his control. And now, she had the power to end it all, the power to shatter the throne and with it, the empire's centuries-long grip on corruption. But as her sword gleamed in the light, Xiu Mei's mind raced. What would rise in the wake of the thrones? Destruction? Could she truly rebuild the empire from the ashes? Or would it fall into an even darker chaos, with new forces rising to take control? "Do it," the man beside her urged, his voice low and insistent. "It's time to end the emperors." Reign. Xiu Mei stood at the precipice, torn between the old world and the new, between the destruction of the throne and the uncertain future that awaited the empire. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her, as if the very fate of the world rested upon her shoulders. And then, with a single decisive motion, Xiu Mei raised her sword. But just as she prepared to strike, a sudden noise broke through the chaos. A deafening crash, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. Before Xiu Mei could react, the door to the throne room burst open, and a group of heavily armed soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised. "Stop!" a voice shouted from behind them. The commander of the guards, a tall, imposing figure, stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Xiu Mei. "Do not move." Xiu Mei froze, her sword still raised, but the room fell silent as the guards closed in around her. She could see the uncertainty in their eyes, the confusion and the fear. The emperor's reign was unraveling, but it was clear that the palace was not ready to accept its demise. The commander's gaze flicked to the emperor, who had not moved. From his throne, his expression as vacant as ever. And then, in an unexpected twist, the commander's eyes shifted back to Xiu Mei. "You," the commander said, his voice full of disbelief. "You're the one who's been causing all of this." Xiu Mei's grip tightened on her sword, her heart pounding. The moment of truth had arrived. There would be no turning back. Now, the empire was on the edge of collapse, and the question was no longer whether it would fall, but who would rise in its wake. The Emperor's throne room, once a symbol of supreme power, had now become a battleground. A chamber filled with uncertainty, betrayal, and looming chaos. Xiu Mei stood frozen in place, her sword still raised, poised to strike the Emperor. Yet, now the world around her seemed to slow to an unbearable stillness. The shout of the commander of the guards echoed in her ears, but for a moment, everything felt like a dream, something distant and unreachable. The soldiers, all heavily armed and brimming with loyalty to the Emperor, surrounded her, their weapons gleaming like ominous reflections of the throne itself. The Emperor remained seated, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding before him. His eyes were fixed on nothing, a shell of the ruler he had once been. The curse of the Golden Lotus had claimed him, consumed him from the inside out, leaving only this hollow man who could neither rule nor resist the forces around him. Xiu Mei's grip tightened around her sword's hilt as the realization hit her hard. The act she was about to commit, the destruction of the Emperor, the curse, and the very seat of the Empire's power, was not a simple solution. It would bring the Empire to its knees. It would devastate everything she knew. Would the people rise to rebuild the Empire, or would this only mark the beginning of a much darker period? Could she possibly bear the weight of her actions? The commander's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. You've made your choice, Xiu Mei. I don't know who you think you are, but you've put us all in jeopardy. If you think you can destroy the throne and take the Emperor's life so easily, you've misjudged. We will not stand by and let you plunge the Empire into chaos. A low murmur rose from the soldiers surrounding them. Their gazes flicked nervously between the Emperor and Xiu Mei, uncertainty and fear clouding their expressions. Many of them knew the Emperor's reign was over, that the Golden Lotus had corrupted him, but to question the throne was heresy. They were bound by duty, by centuries of tradition, and yet now they faced a woman, a single figure standing before the very core of their world. Xiu Mei could feel the weight of the jade box against her side, like a beating heart, pulsing with an energy that was beyond her control. What do I do? The question rang through her mind. She had come to destroy the throne, but what was she truly destroying? Would the Golden Lotus be severed, or would she only create a vacuum of power in which something darker might rise? Step away, Xiu Mei, the commander warned. This is your last chance. There is still time to turn back before this all falls apart. Xiu Mei hesitated. Her sword was still poised in midair, and the tension in the room seemed to stretch to its breaking point. She was trapped in a moment of decision, every possible outcome weighing heavily on her shoulders. In her chest, she could feel the unspoken call of the jade box, a pull to act, to make the final strike, but she could not ignore the sense that this battle had already gone beyond her. Before she could react, a sudden voice broke the silence. A voice from the shadows that made her blood run cold. Enough, the voice commanded. The room seemed to freeze as an old figure emerged from the corner of the hall, stepping into the dim light that bathed the throne room. His robes were dark, elegant, and covered in intricate patterns, but it was not his appearance that took Xiu Mei's breath away. It was the presence he exuded. This man radiated power, a quiet authority that had the effect of silencing even the murmurs of the soldiers around her. He moved slowly, as though each step was carefully measured, and as he approached the throne, his eyes fell upon the Emperor, who sat in his cursed stupor. "Uncle," the man said quietly, his voice soft, but carrying an undeniable weight. "I see you have not yet learned that the throne is no longer yours to command." Xiu Mei's heart skipped a beat. Uncle? The Emperor's relative? But the man's identity was quickly revealed in the cold, calculating look he gave her. His gaze was sharp, measuring her, and there was something unsettling about it, a silent knowing that seemed to pierce through her. "Your Majesty," the man continued, addressing the emperor without any reverence, his tone almost mocking. I do hope you understand that your reign is over, not because of the curse, but because you have allowed yourself to be led by fools. The emperor's eyes fluttered, the faintest spark of recognition in them, but the man's gaze quickly turned to Xiu Mei. His eyes narrowed, and a slow, sinister smile spread across his lips. I'm surprised to see you here, Xiu Mei, he said, almost as if he had been expecting her arrival. The prophecy has unfolded just as I planned, but it seems you've come to the wrong conclusion. Xiu Mei's blood ran cold as realization struck her like a thunderclap. This was no ordinary nobleman. The man before her was no simple advisor or soldier. His presence was commanding, his authority unmistakable. And there was something deeply unsettling about the way he spoke, too calmly, too assuredly, as though he knew exactly how things would unfold. The man took a step closer, and Xiu Mei could see the slight gleam of his eyes. Do you know, Xiu Mei, that there is far more to the Golden Lotus than anyone has ever told you? The curse is not a curse at all. It is a tool, a mechanism set in place to guide the Empire toward its true destiny. And now you, standing here with the power to break it, are in a position to shape the future of everything. The words hung in the air like a dark omen, and Xiu Mei felt her grip on the jade box tighten. Who are you? She demanded, her voice trembling. She could feel the weight of the man's gaze, his words wrapping around her like chains, but she refused to show fear. Not now. Not when the truth was finally within her grasp. The man's lips curled into a slow, predatory smile. I am the one who has shaped the Empire's destiny from the shadows. I am Tianlong, the true power behind the throne, and I have waited a long time for you to arrive. Xiu Mei's heart raced. Tianlong. The name was unfamiliar, but his words hit her like a revelation. He was the force that had shaped the Empire's rulers, the puppet master behind the Emperor's decay, behind the curse. He was the one who had controlled everything from the shadows, manipulating the Empire's fate for his own ends. You? She whispered, shock rippling through her. You've been controlling the Empire from behind the throne? You've caused all this suffering? Tianlong's expression softened, almost sympathetically, as he stepped closer. I did not cause suffering, Xiu Mei. I ensured that the Empire stayed on the path it was meant to take. The throne, the curse, it was all necessary. The Empire must be kept in balance, even if it means making sacrifices. The Golden Lotus is the key to that balance. Without it, the Empire would fall into anarchy. Xiu Mei's mind reeled as the truth began to sink in. The curse of the Golden Lotus was not an accident, nor was it something that needed to be destroyed. It was a part of a far grander plan, a plan crafted by Tianlong himself. He had been the one orchestrating the downfall of the Empire's rulers, not as a destroyer, but as a guardian of its destiny. But this did not sit right with her. The Empire was fractured, corrupt, and decaying. There was no balance in this curse. Rule, only suffering. Tianlong's vision was one of control, not freedom. And in that moment, Xiu Mei knew what she had to do. She raised the jade box, feeling the pulse of its energy vibrate through her, and with a decisive motion, she turned to face the Emperor. The path was clearer now, but the choices before her were no less daunting. The balance she had sought to restore was not a simple matter of destruction. She had to choose whether to stand against Tianlong and his vision, or to embrace it. Her heart pounded as she steeled herself for what was to come. Xiu Mei's hands trembled, but her resolve solidified. The words Tianlong spoke echoed through her mind, ringing with an unsettling clarity. The Empire must be kept in balance, even if it means making sacrifices. Tianlong believed he was the Empire's guardian, its architect of fate, but in his eyes, she saw something darker. control, manipulation, and the systematic bending of the Empire's will to his desires. Xiu Mei's heart was torn in two. She had come to destroy the curse, to break the chains that bound the Emperor and the Empire. But now she realized that destroying the throne was not a simple matter of slaying a tyrant. It was a matter of confronting the system itself, the system that Tianlong had built over centuries. The curse was not just a mark of the Emperor's downfall, but a tool used to ensure the Empire's future, a future that was shaped and controlled by hidden hands. The jade box she held pulsed in her hands, its rhythm steady, like the heartbeat of the Empire itself. She could feel its power, ancient and strong, but there was something else beneath it, a sense of urgency. The Empire was at the edge of collapse, and the future was hanging in the balance. Tianlong had made his move, and now Xiu Mei had to decide. Would she accept his vision for the Empire, or would she fight against it? Tianlong's eyes gleamed with dark satisfaction as he watched her, sensing her internal struggle. He stepped closer, his voice smooth and enticing, like a serpent's hiss. "You are stronger than I thought, Xiu Mei, but strength alone is not enough. What you carry in that box, what you seek to destroy, is not just a curse, but a balance that has kept this empire from falling into ruin. Without it, there is no future, only chaos." Xiu Mei's gaze flickered to the Emperor, still seated upon his throne, his eyes dull and unfocused. The Emperor was but a shell of what he once was, a puppet tethered to a curse that had consumed him, body and soul. And yet, he still held the throne, a symbol of the Empire's power, a power that had been corrupted by forces like Tianlong's. "I will not let you control the Empire any longer," Xiu Mei said, her voice steady, though every word felt like a weight pressing on her chest. "This Empire deserves better than this. It deserves a future built on truth, not on control and lies." Tianlong's smile faltered, his eyes darkening. "You do not understand, Xiu Mei. I have shaped this empire, and I have ensured that it survives. I have preserved the balance, even when it meant sacrifices. What you would do is destroy everything, the throne, the curse, the very structure that keeps the empire from crumbling." The tension in the room thickened as the soldiers, who had surrounded them, began to move closer. The Emperor's loyalists, once unwavering in their devotion, now seemed uncertain, their loyalty to the throne waning as the truth about the curse began to unravel before their eyes. Xiu Mei's grip tightened around the jade box, her heart racing. "The balance you speak of is nothing more than a lie. The empire is falling apart. The people suffer. This so-called balance has led to nothing but death and despair. The Golden Lotus has consumed the Emperor. It has consumed everything." She turned back to Tianlong, her voice rising with determination. "I won't let you use this empire as your puppet. The curse will be broken, and the throne will be destroyed. There is no future in the way things are." Tianlong's expression twisted, the mask of calm slipping to reveal something far darker beneath. "You are a fool, Xiu Mei," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "You have no idea what you are unleashing. The power of the Golden Lotus, the curse you seek to destroy, it is not just a force of control. It is the Empire itself. And if you destroy it, you will tear apart the very fabric of this world. The Empire will burn, and there will be nothing left but ashes." The room seemed to shake with the force of his words, but Xiu Mei did not flinch. She had come too far to turn back now. She had seen the truth. Tianlong was not a savior of the Empire, but its greatest threat. He had used the curse to manipulate and control, bending the will of the Empire to his desires. She had to stop him. She had to break the chains that bound them all. With a swift motion, Xiu Mei lifted the jade box high, and the air around her seemed to crackle with energy. The power of the Golden Lotus surged within her, responding to her will. She felt the weight of the curse pressing against her, but she also felt a surge of determination. The time for hesitations was over. "I will not let you destroy the Empire any longer," she said, her voice a roar of defiance. Before Tuanlong could respond, the jade box in her hands flared with a blinding light. The energy contained within it exploded outward, a shockwave that rattled the very foundations of the throne room. The soldiers staggered back, shielding their eyes from the intense light, and the air hummed with an almost palpable force. Xiu Mei felt the power of the golden lotus coursing through her, but this time she was in control. The curse was not her enemy. It was the tool she would use to destroy the Empire's false balance. The power that had been used to enslave the Emperor was now hers to command. Tianlong stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock and fury. "No," he shouted, but the light from the jade box had already reached its peak, and in that moment, the throne room seemed to explode with the fury of the golden lotus. The air crackled as the curse was torn apart, unraveling its grip on the Emperor, on the throne, and on the Empire. Xiu Mei felt a deep, resonating power shift within her as she closed her eyes as the energy swirled around her. The Empire's foundations trembled, and the weight of centuries of manipulation, of false rule, seemed to collapse in an instant. The golden lotus was no more. The curse had been broken. When the light faded, Xiu Mei found herself standing alone in the throne room. The soldiers were scattered, some unconscious, others fleeing in fear. The Emperor still sat on his throne, but the hollow emptiness that had consumed him was gone. His eyes, though still dull, were no longer filled with the same hopelessness. For the first time in years, there was a flicker of awareness in them. Xiu Mei's breath came in ragged gasps as she took a step forward. She looked down at the jade box in her hands, now empty of its dark power. The energy had dissipated, leaving behind a heavy silence. The Empire was no longer under the curse of the Golden Lotus, but what would come next? Tianlong lay on the ground, his form twisted and broken from the force of the energy that had been unleashed. He was not dead, but he was defeated. The power he had so carefully cultivated for centuries was no more. The throne was no longer his to control. Xiu Mei stepped forward and stood before the Emperor, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had just done. She had broken the chains that bound him. But what did that mean for the future of the Empire? What would rise in the wake of the destruction she had caused? But before she could ask herself these questions, the Emperor spoke. His voice weak but steady. "Did you break it?" he asked quietly. "The curse?" Xiu Mei nodded, her voice soft as she replied, "Yes, it is done." For a long moment, there was only silence between them. And then, in the dim light of the throne room, the Emperor's voice broke the stillness again, this time with a single haunting question. "What now?" The throne room of the Forbidden City, once filled with grandeur and unshakable authority, now felt hollow. The energy that had suffused the space, an energy born of the Golden Lotus, the curse that had enslaved the Empire for centuries, was gone, dissipated into the ether like smoke. The air was still, oppressive, and yet there was something strangely hopeful about the quiet that followed the chaos. The struggle was over, but a new battle had only just begun. Xiu Mei stood in the heart of the Emperor's once grand hall, the jade box now empty in her hands, and she felt the weight of the moment press upon her. She had broken the curse. The Golden Lotus, the force that had corrupted the Emperor and the Empire for so long, was no more. But with that destruction came a new reality. The throne, the symbol of the Empire's power, stood empty, and the Empire itself was at a precipice. What would rise from the ashes? Would it be a new dawn of hope and prosperity, or a descent into darkness and ruin? The Emperor's gaze lingered on her, weary but filled with a flicker of something she had not seen in him before. Awareness, perhaps, or a recognition of the enormity of what had just transpired. He had been a prisoner in his own mind for so long, and now, for the first time, he was free. But what kind of ruler would he be without the curse to control him? Was he even capable of ruling in the aftermath of the destruction she had caused? Xiu Mei took a tentative step forward, her sword still in hand, but her mind was no longer focused on the battle. Her purpose was clear: to destroy the curse, to break the chains of power that had bound the Emperor and the Empire for centuries. Yet now that the curse had been broken, she felt a deep uncertainty about what lay ahead. The Emperor's voice broke through her thoughts, faint but steady. "It is done, then?" Xiu Mei nodded, her throat tight. "The curse is gone. The throne, the power it held, it's all been destroyed." The Emperor closed his eyes for a long moment, as though processing her words. When he opened them again, there was no longer the emptiness that had consumed him before. His gaze, though still burdened with the weight of the Empire's history, held something different now: remorse, perhaps, or recognition of his own failures. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How many lives have been lost to the curse? How many dreams shattered?" Xiu Mei swallowed hard. The truth was unavoidable. The Emperor had not been the sole architect of the Empire's downfall. He had been a puppet, manipulated by forces far beyond his control. But that did not absolve him. In the end, he had sat on the throne, and his rule had cost the lives of countless people. "Your reign is over," she said quietly, her voice firm but without malice. "The Empire can no longer be governed as it was." For a moment, the Emperor seemed to shrink before her, his shoulders slumping as though the weight of his past finally came crashing down. Xiu Mei could see the toll it had taken on him, the years of power that had slowly eaten away at his soul, the burden of a throne that had been more of a prison than a seat of leadership. But then, the Emperor raised his head, meeting her gaze with a surprising clarity in his eyes. "And what now, Xiu Mei? What is to become of this empire?" Xiu Mei looked out over the throne room, the once majestic hall now a symbol of decay and destruction. She could feel the weight of the question pressing on her chest. The empire had been built on centuries of power and bloodshed, a machine that had been carefully controlled by those who understood the forces that shaped the world. The Golden Lotus, the curse, had been the cornerstone of that power. But without it, the empire was like a house without a foundation, a kingdom that had lost its purpose. "The people will rise," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of an uncertain future. "The empire must be rebuilt, not with force, not with blood, but with truth and justice. It is time to free the people from the chains of the past." The Emperor said nothing for a long time, and Xiu Mei could see the conflict in his eyes. There was a quiet sorrow there, but there was also something else, a flicker of hope, perhaps, or the possibility of redemption. The throne was no longer his to claim, but the Empire still needed a leader. The question was, would the Emperor step forward to lead, or would someone else rise in his place? Tianlong, still lying defeated on the ground, groaned softly, his eyes flickering open. He had been the true architect of the Empire's darkness, the puppet master who had controlled everything from the shadows. His power had crumbled with the fall of the Golden Lotus, but Xiu Mei knew that he was far from powerless. He had already played his cards, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. With a flick of her wrist, Xiu Mei moved to him, her sword raised in a single decisive motion. "Tianlong," she said coldly, "you will answer for your crimes." Tianlong's lips curled into a weak smile as he slowly tried to push himself up, his voice raspy. "You think this is over, Xiu Mei? You think destroying the curse will free you? You don't understand. The Empire has always been controlled by those like me. You are just a puppet, too, caught in the same web. Xiu Mei's expression hardened. Your web has been torn apart. You will not control this empire any longer. She raised her sword, and in one swift motion, she brought it down. Tianlong fell silent, his body crumpling beneath the weight of her blade. The empire's darkest force was no more. But his words still echoed in her mind, a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The battle for the throne was over, but the fight for the soul of the empire had just begun. Xiu Mei turned back to the emperor, who had watched the exchange silently. He was still seated upon his throne, but there was no longer any power in it. No more authority in the empty seat. The throne had been a symbol of the empire's oppression, its corruption. But now, the empire needed something new. Xiu Mei, the emperor said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. What will you do now? She took a long, steadying breath as she turned away from the throne and toward the door of the palace. I will rebuild, she said, her voice full of quiet determination. The people will rebuild. The empire will be reborn, not from the ashes of the golden lotus, but from the ashes of the truth. Xiu Mei stepped out of the throne room and into the courtyard, the cool wind brushing against her face. The empire was on the brink of a new beginning, and while the road ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The future of the empire was no longer controlled by the throne, by curses, or by the puppet masters who had held sway for centuries. The future was now in the hands of the people. The future was hers to shape. The winds of change were sweeping through the empire as Xiu Mei stood in the courtyard of the Forbidden City, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The once unfathomable weight of the emperor's throne had crumbled, and the empire, like a wounded beast, was slowly stirring to life again. The Jade Emperor's reign had ended, but the legacy of his rule, an empire built on power, deceit, and bloodshed, remained like a scar upon the land. And now Xiu Mei, the bearer of the golden lotus, the one who had broken the curse, was tasked with the unimaginable, to rebuild what had been shattered and create a future where power would no longer come at the cost of humanity. The weight of the jade box she carried was lighter now, its ancient power no longer binding her to the past. It had served its purpose. It had been the key to breaking the empire's chains. But now it was empty. The box had no more magic to offer. What remained was the raw, unyielding strength of Xiu Mei's resolve, the resolve to bring about a new age, to right the wrongs of the past. But even as the winds blew fresh and cold, carrying the scent of change, Xiu Mei knew the road ahead was fraught with peril. The empire had been ruled by fear, by puppeteers like Tianlong, and it would not be easily shaped into something new. The web of power that had once controlled the emperor, the nobility, and the soldiers was still deeply embedded in the empire's very bones. It would take more than just one woman's will to tear it down. It would take a movement, a revolution, and a rebirth of ideals that the empire had long forgotten. And it would take time. Xiu Mei walked through the streets of the capital city, her cloak billowing behind her, the sound of her footsteps echoing against the marble streets. The people watched her, unsure whether to greet her as a liberator or as a harbinger of yet another unknown. They had seen their rulers fall before, only to be replaced by new ones who promised change but delivered only more of the same. But this time, something was different. Xiu Mei had broken the golden lotus. She had ended the curse that had bound the throne, and now she had to lead the people toward a new dawn. She reached the city's central square, where the statue of the Jade Emperor had once stood, an imposing figure of power, his face carved with the arrogance of centuries. But now, the statue had been torn down, its remains scattered across the square. In its place stood a simple monument, one not to the Xiu Emperor, but to the people who had suffered under his rule. It was a humble stone, inscribed with the words, "For those who never gave up hope, for those who fought, and for those who died." The square was filled with people, their eyes watching Xiu Mei with a mixture of reverence and uncertainty. The legacy of the Jade Emperor was gone, but the legacy of those who had fought for freedom, for justice, for truth, those people were the foundation upon which the new empire would be built. Xiu Mei climbed a small set of steps to the monument and stood before the gathered crowd. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the weight of the responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. She had broken the curse, but the hardest part was still ahead. "I stand before you today," Xiu Mei began, her voice steady and strong, "not as a ruler, but as one who shares your pain, your loss, and your hope. The empire that was built upon lies, upon blood and greed, has fallen. The curse that controlled, the emperor that poisoned our rulers and our people, is no more. But we are not free yet. The road ahead is long, and it will require all of us to rebuild what has been broken." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, seeing the faces of the old and the young, the weary and the hopeful. There were no soldiers here, no nobles, only the people, the ones who had lived through the years of turmoil, who had endured the hardships, who had seen their land torn apart by the actions of those who claimed to rule in their name. "The throne is no more," Xiu Mei continued, her voice rising with emotion. "And yet, I will not take it. I will not rule over you, for the throne is not a place of power. It is a symbol of the very forces that have kept us in chains for so long. The people of this empire will not be ruled by a throne, nor by any one person. We will be ruled by justice, by truth, and by the will of the people." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Xiu Mei could feel the weight of their uncertainty, their hesitation. They had been ruled by the throne for centuries, and now she was asking them to believe in something they had never known. A government of the people, by the people, for the people. "But," Xiu Mei said, stepping forward, "there is one thing I ask of you, to help rebuild what has been destroyed. To not forget the pain of the past, but to learn from it. The empire was built upon a foundation of corruption, but we can build something new. A government where the people's voices are heard, where justice is served, and where the future is no longer defined by the mistakes of the past." The silence stretched on for a moment, and then, from the back of the crowd, a single voice broke through. "We will follow you." The words were quiet at first, but soon others joined in. "We will follow you. We will rebuild. We will be free." Xiu Mei felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest, but she pushed it back, focusing on the work that lay ahead. This was the beginning of something new, something that would take years, maybe even generations, to fully realize. But she could see it now, the flicker of hope in the people's eyes, the spark of something greater than the empire's broken past. The sun began to set as Xiu Mei stood before the people, the shadows of the city stretching long behind her. The path ahead was uncertain, but in this moment, she knew that she had made the right choice. The legacy of the Jade Emperor had ended, but a new legacy was beginning, a legacy not built on power, but on truth. A legacy that would carry the empire forward into the light of a new dawn. The fire of the empire had long since burned out, but now a new fire was beginning to take shape. It was the fire of the people, of their resilience, of their determination to rise from the ashes of the past. And Xiu Mei, the one who had broken the curse, would lead them into that future. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Xiu Mei turned and walked away from the monument. Her heart steady, her purpose clear. The empire would rise again, not from the ashes of the throne, but from the strength of its people. And in the distance, the sound of a new empire being born. began to echo through the streets.